Hello, and welcome to today's live social stream. I'm Rick Vanover, Senior Director of Product Strategy, and I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure. It's the newest product that's joined the Veeam portfolio. We launched it just on Tuesday. That's all we're going to talk about here today. There's a lot of questions, a lot of anticipation. So we've got some teams here. I'm already looking at some of the chats. Great. Welcome Juan, welcome Craig, welcome others. If you have a question, go ahead and drop it in the LinkedIn comments. I've got Christian and some of my team here that can help us field the questions. I'll answer them out loud if I can. But Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure, that's the topic of the day, right? If you've not been to the Veeam page, you can see that we now have this product available. And there's 4 things I want to communicate to you about this product. We're going to show you the deployment and show you how it works. It's cloud native Azure Backup. How cool is that? Here we are in 2020. We're using the cloud. We're consuming Azure more than ever. So agentless cloud native backup in Azure. How cool is that? It's so cool. Anyways, then we have some really cool safeguards around cost control and predictions around how much it's going to cost to back up these workloads. It's ready for the hybrid and enterprise cloud, as well as being a secure and resilient way to do your protection. So here's the Veeam.com page, but one of the easiest ways to deploy that solution is in the Azure Marketplace. Now, a lot of us are new to the cloud, and I look at myself, I'm on a continual learning journey for Azure storage services, blob, disk storage, etc. And the marketplace is a way to consume apps and services, right? So if you've not been to the Azure Marketplace, this is what it is. It's the Azure Marketplace. Let's just search for Veeam. Now you're going to find a lot of stuff, right? We've got the Veeam PN tool, Cloud Connect for the enterprise, and all kinds of other things. But the newest one here, let's see here, Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure Free Edition. And did you know there's also a free edition? It's going to allow you to do up to 10 VM backups for free. Now I'm going to go ahead and deploy this real quick, and I've already got it deployed. I want to show you a couple things kind of before and after. But let's watch how easy it is to deploy Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure. So here we are in the marketplace. Let's just do the get it now. If you're not familiar with the marketplace, you can see that this application can be deployed straight away from the Azure Marketplace. And what this will actually do is create a Azure virtual machine that runs the software for Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure. So you don't have to download, install, configure. You just do all of that in the marketplace. It's a different model compared to on-premises software where most of us kind of cut our teeth in IT. So let's go ahead and continue with this. And it's going to redirect within the page to allow us to answer some key questions here. So let's go ahead and do it. So here we are. Let's go ahead and create this deployment, Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure Free Edition. The BYO edition is going to go very much the same way. The free edition is a great way to get started, and I recommend a couple of things. One, I recommend that you allocate an Azure subscription and a resource group that you can play around with. So I have one right here, and I've even made a name that makes sense. VSC, Veeam Software Corporation, RWV, that's me. 0 dev 0, so something that clearly makes sense for my name of what I'm going to call this stuff. So I'm going to copy some of that and I'm going to use that. But let's go ahead and deploy Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure. Now I have this subscription that's pay as you go, and I have a resource group already made, and I'm doing a lot of work on that, but I really encourage you to use a resource group in Azure that is suitable for any test dev work. That's the whole nature of the cloud, building up and taking down systems. So when you think about having a secure and a compliant way to do backups, you want to make sure that you don't mix with production and development environments. So I'm clearly naming that this is a dev VBA demo, Veeam Backup for Azure. So always give some thought to the resource groups, because once you think about all the required permissions and the changes that happen to your environment once you deploy something like this, we want to make sure that, especially if you're trying it out, that it is something that you can clean up just as easy and move to production. So I'm going to give the virtual machine a name, and I'm going to you see already that name already exists. So I'm going to call it, let's just call it VM Z for Z, because this is the demo. I already have one created. I'm going to select the Azure region I want, which I'm doing all of this in US Central. And I'm not going to do any changes to these default settings. I am going to change over to password versus public key. So let's just do that real quick. I got to think real hard on this password because we make it a long password, which is good. So let's do that. And I got to think. So I can't talk and think at the same time. I'm thinking and I'm talking. It's not a good combination. And they match. So it does want a 12 character or more password, but I'm just going to go do that. And then I'm going to look through these default options real quick. I could go with standard SSD and all these types of things. It's important to note, this isn't where the backup is going to be stored. I'll get to that in a second. This is just where Veeam Backup for Azure is going to live. I'm going to just keep all of these defaults. And we've documented this all in Help Center, which is the great documentation site that we have for all Veeam products. So I'm just going to take all of these options straight through as default, because it is that easy to get started with Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. So it's running the validation right now. I've put in all of these options, and you'll see up here, the validation passed. So I've put in place here a Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure deployment that should make sense. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and create this. Now, what's going to happen here is if I go over to my list of virtual machines, before I started here, I've got 3 virtual machines, number 2 and number 3, but then number 0, that one is the Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure that I've already deployed. And so when you look at a resource pool, a resource group of your Azure VMs, what you're going to see is your Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure VM, and then 1 or more workers, depending on where and what you're backing up. Now, worker is just basically a data mover that moves data for the course of the backup. And I'll get to that here in a second. Now, I'm going to refresh this, and you'll see that I still have those 4, but I just deployed that other one. It's going to pop in here in a second. So we're going to come back to that because I want to show you what the out-of-the-box experience looks like. Now, I mentioned that I already had one deployed, and I have right here the public IP address for the one that's already deployed. And this particular one's running in Central. It's ready to go. And we're going to go ahead and log into it. And I've got a few things already configured, and that didn't work. What I want to do is actually just copy it, but let's do this. And let's go to it. There we go. That's what I want to do. It does need HTTPS. Could have just copied and pasted, but let's do this. So here we go, Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure. Now, I have configured both of these with the same credentials because thinking and talking at the same time is kind of hard to do, or typing the right password and username is even harder. So trying to give good attention to that, and I did. So right away with Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure, when you log in, you can see that we have a quick view. I'm backing up those 2 instances that you saw, 2 protected VMs with 1 policy. Now, one thing I should highlight, and you might think this is not the same as what I'm seeing. I'm using a dark plugin, right? That makes my Chrome. I'm a little bit fancy in the dark mode now, right? So Dark Reader is a nice little plugin that I like here for that. But what I want to show you here is that the experience is very easy to do backups in Azure. So what I want to do is just gravitate into a policy here. So I have one simple sample policy, and I'm just going to go ahead and edit it real quick so that you can see kind of how easy it is to do these backups. So I've given it a name, sample policy, which is, if you've ever used any other Veeam products, it's really the same logic. A couple of steps of a wizard, you have your backup. And then I'm going to ask, what is my authentication here? So I'm using the default directory credential here for the account I'm using. Which regions are you wanting to think about doing your backups? Now, I'm only going to use the US Central region because I'm only playing with the VMs in that region. So I've only added 1 region. And then it's going to ask me, what am I going to protect? So I actually like the idea of protecting everything in the resource group. If you think about that as a container, that's a great way to make sure you're not missing any Azure VMs. So the thought here is that I want to back up the whole resource group, but I also can back it up by everything in a subscription or anything with a certain tag or an explicit list of virtual machines. This is actually really powerful. The the good, better, best way to look at it is to take these containers, whether it's the tag, the resource group, or the subscription, which everything will be kind of collectively backed up with the policy. So that's pretty cool. And you could also drop in some exclusions. For example, I don't want this one, but here's a good thing. Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure is smart enough to exclude itself from the backup. You don't necessarily back itself up in the workers. So those Azure VMs will be excluded by default. And there's a separate way to do a configuration type of backup. So don't get too concerned over that. Now, here's where it starts to get awesome. As a, let's just say, lifetime, most of my professional career advocate of not losing data, right? Whether in the last 10 years that I've been here at Veeam, I've put backup as my leading technology. But even before that, I didn't ever want to lose data. There is always this mindset of a snapshot is not a backup. And that applies in the cloud as well. So the first one of these options are, let's create a snapshot. So a snapshot in the cloud is a little different, right? It's not a storage array snapshot like we know. It's more of like a VM snapshot. I can or not, so I have the option to do a snapshot and then a backup, which is the next option. I'm going to create 2 snapshots at every day at 8 o'clock. Now this snapshot has higher recovery speed. It's native to the platform in Azure, but it has a higher cost, okay, because of the storage requirements. Okay, that's great. But then it gets interesting here. Then I could put in a proper backup. And I've already set up an Azure Blob container, but this is going on blob storage. So you have that object storage engine with a different cost profile, but it also has a different use case, right? It's going to be slower to restore from compared to a snapshot, but it's a good candidate storage for longer term retention. So I'm actually taking a snapshot and a backup with this policy. So this is very interesting because when I think about how I'm doing my backups and my snapshots, if I want one or the other or both, you have some very cost-efficient techniques here with this. So look what I've got here. This is going to estimate how much it's going to cost me to back up Veeam, backup with Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure in the cloud. It's estimating that, it's going to cost me this much to do the retention from snapshots and backups. And you'll see the snapshots cost more. So what I'm getting at is you have a very cost-efficient technique here to estimate how much it's going to cost on your backup spend. Because if I go back up here to snapshots, and let's suppose I put a ridiculous number like 365. I want to keep a year of Azure VM snapshots. You know what that's going to do to my cost profile? Well, it's going to change it. So what was about $15 for this? Well, now it's like quadrupled, right? It's $70, right? So you can quite clearly see what happens here with these different types of changes. And I'm going to change it back because I might not get that expense approved. The question just came in from Ali. What added value does Veeam Backup have compared to other solutions? Well, first of all, this is free for one. Second of all, there's support for multiple accounts, which is a big deal. And then when we put the backups in the blob storage, Ali, that's when it gets really interesting here. So just like that, I have a couple of different other checks, like send me an email, right? That's always good. And then done, we have our policy. So what I'm going to do here now, and Ali, I didn't plan on showing it, but I will just because you asked. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. Now, I have this completely in Azure. But Ali, what I'm about to show you is pretty cool. And I didn't plan on showing you this, but you wanted to see it. So I'm going to log into my on-premises lab. Okay. So my on-premises lab here, did you know that I can actually have this hybrid experience where if I have my Azure VMs, I can actually get access to those backups on premises. So the environment I'm going to log into now through Horizon View, that's like my VMware and Hyper-V environments on-prem in the Veeam lab, which let's get a little bit better look here. But basically, when I log into this, Look what I have here, Ollie. I have the external repository. That's that sample policy that I was just talking about. Where's my Zoom It? I love my Zoom It. There it is. On premises, sitting right next to my VMware and Hyper-V environment, those Azure VMs are exposed to me here from a backup copy job that I've already set up. And did you know I can actually instant recover that as a VMware virtual machine on-prem, or I could pick it up and throw it to another cloud if I wanted. So imagine the portability options. You can restore a file. You can boot the VM up, the Azure VM up as a VMware virtual machine. That's a difference maker. Kind of give you bonus for being a live attendee. How about that? So that's a very quick tour of how to set up a policy, but I want to come back to that out-of-the-box experience, which was something that we started with. So we deployed Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure through the marketplace. That was the very first thing that we did. And it's now telling me that it's done. Okay, great. So what I'm going to show you now is what you would get right when you go to set up. So I had that one already set up, but let's go over here to my list of virtual machines. You might remember that I had, I think it was 4. Now I have some more virtual machines. Let's see what we've got going on. Then the one that I added was called VMZ. And you'll see that some workers are doing their work. They come and go and turn off as they need. But the one at the bottom is VMZ. That's the new instance of Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. So when I look at that, I've got a new public IP here. There it is. So let's go ahead and, actually, let's just do that. And I'm going to show you the complete out-of-the-box experience. Okay. So I've deployed in the marketplace. Let's get started with Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure. And let's do it this way. We got a LOL awesome from somebody. Okay, that's great. Wasn't meant to be a comedy show, but I'm glad you're entertained. So let's log in now to out-of-the-box experience. Again, we're going to have to log in. Let's go in with my username. It's a long password. I got to think real hard. Hopefully I did it right in the marketplace. I did. Okay. Then, like any other install, we're going to have to start with a EULA. So we're going to scroll through that as you normally would. And we're right here at the start. And like all of our newer products, so Veeam Backup for AWS, Veeam Availability Orchestrator, Veeam Service Provider Console, we've gone to this like web view here, and it tells you exactly what you need to do. So the first thing you can see right away is that there's 3 to-dos. Microsoft Azure connection, which Azure account and region are we going to use? We're going to add a repository. That is the Azure blob bucket. And then create the first policy. Now, when I ran through that policy and ran it, that's basically what you saw. But through those 3 steps, adding the storage subscription account, the storage account connection, and the Azure connection, selecting a region, putting in the blob storage and running it, you're good to go. The ease of use with this product, friends, is absolutely incredible. And just like that, you can have it underway. So one other question came in from Ajay. Ajay wants to know, I'd like to know more about long-term retention with that policy. Well, the good news about the cloud and Azure in particular is that it's all about consuming cloud resources. So I don't think there's going to be an issue for long-term retention and blob storage. And then from there, you should be able to retain as much as you want. The second question you had, Ajay, was around encrypted VMs in Azure. And the good news is we have great documentation at helpcenter.veeam.com. And I'm going to go on over to the user guide. And again, that username up at the top, that URL up at the top is helpcenter.veeam.com. And in here, you can say, you can take a look, and I'll just, actually, I'm just going to search in this document for encrypted, and that should give me an answer here. I know that we do encrypt the backups that we're storing. So the backup repository here. So let's double check here. I'm going to look here. Well, we don't have it specifically called out here, Ajay, so I would check this documentation because this is how I find answers to these products as well. Ulf has a question, are all regions supported? I believe so, Ulf. The only exception is that we don't currently have support in like the government regions for this product yet. And Elvier asks, what about other cloud providers such as AWS? Yeah, this product's already in place for Veeam Backup for AWS. Now, my goal here is to give you a quick tour of how easy it is to do a backup, how easy it is to do a restore, which I didn't actually show you, but I'll do that real quick. Once you have your protected data, you'll see that different VMs have different levels of retentions. You just drive those restores right here, whether it's a full virtual machine, and right there you can see it, pulling back just a disk, or even just doing something like a file level recovery or the whole image recovery. So you can do both of those right there like that. So that was my goal here today. And believe it or not, you're going to find a whole bunch more about this product at VeeamON. And VeeamON is going to be in June of this year, 17th and 18th. We have at least 2 different sessions focused on this product in a little bit more depth. And then from there, we're going to have some on-demand content, including one particular topic under the hood with this product. So you can go to veeamon.com and you can register for that. Vish just asked a question, can we adjust the size of the Veeam VM if required? 2 different ways. Once, when you deploy it through the marketplace, you can change the geometry. And then just like any other Azure VM, if you shut it off and hit the size button, you can adjust it. David asks what type of blob storages are supported. It would be hot and cool, I believe. It depends on the storage account provisioning. But again, what do? I check Help Center just to make sure. So let's do one final call for questions. So go ahead and drop those in the chat. And thank you, Christian, for managing that. And the other thing I want to highlight is, guess what? People are showing up to these social events and they are doing well. We have another one coming up on Monday, 12 Eastern and 11 Central here in North America, about industry insights. Jason and Dave always come in with the good stuff. Both of them former analysts, but they're going to be talking about shifts in the data protection marketplace. We got some latest market share numbers. So anything that your decision makers need is justification to do more with your backup. These sessions that are coming up from Jason and Dave, and in particular the one on Monday, will be a really good resource for you to attend. Okay, well, the final question I have is, how much is included from the free? That question comes from Joe. Joe, the free edition supports up to 10 virtual machines, so it couldn't be easier for you to get started. So head on over to the Azure Marketplace or the Veeam website to do that. All right, well, that concludes today's stream. I hope everyone enjoyed the content. Thank you for tuning in.